Hello, everybody, and welcome to our 2021 webinar series finale. I can hardly believe another year has passed by. I'm Denise, and back with me to present today is QAD and MRP expert, Don Lindsey. Finally, as soon as the recording of today's session is published, I will send out our encore email, and that blue go-to button you see will be in the email and will take you directly to the webinar replay page. Any questions and their answers will be posted just beneath the video. That's it for housekeeping. So let's welcome back Don Lindsey, whose many decades of experience would never fit on a single slide. But here are a few highlights.
Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you, Denise, for that nice introduction. We hope you are having a wonderful 2021. Year's almost over, which you know the rest of 2021 will be very interesting. And with 2022 coming, who knows? Did you all see that the sale of QAD to Thoma Bravo was finalized on Tuesday, the 2nd of November? That should be interesting. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. After 2 months of in-person conferences at MUG in September and West Coast in October, it's nice to be home again in preparing for our Hall Thanks Xmas celebrations for the next 2 months of the year. Last couple of months, we covered several subjects from new production orders at MUG to sales and operations planning at West Coast. We also discussed EMT, ERP, business relationships over the last couple of months. And Denise will have a short list of webinars we are planning for the first few months of 2020. But today, I would like to talk about another of the multi-site functions in QAD, like S&OP and EMT, and that is DRP. So what is DRP? DRP is an acronym for Distribution Requirements Planning. Distribution Requirements Planning is an inventory and planning function designed for companies with multiple sites having interdependencies of supply and demand. It used to be the management of materials from manufacturing sites to distribution sites. It targets the intra-company transactions and is designed to simplify the movement of information from parts from one site to another. DRP balances supply and demand and transfers material between sites based on what is called a distribution order. Here's a pictograph of a distribution process. The distribution flows from the right to the left, from the end customer demand through the warehouse and distribution network to semi and finished goods down through MRP to the procurement plan. The inventory allocation plan and shortage management is managed from left to right. It is an end-to-end supply chain planning solution. There are many features of DRP that can afford your organization tools of control for your supply chain. It has the ability to represent multiple tier customer to supplier relationships. DRP works across multiple databases on separate computers or within multiple sites on a same database. DRP has manual or automated Intersite requests and request confirmation. There's a whole set of functions for shipping and controlling product between sites. As with any new function in QAD, DRP introduces several new concepts and terms. There are source network structures, similar to product sources in MRP. There is a transportation management function that helps in shipping. There's a shipping load calculator, kind of like CRP. There is a distribution requirements planning process. The DRP action messages are created, similar to MRP. And there are Intersite requests along with demand and distribution orders to handle the shipping functions. DRP benefits the organization by affording instant communication. It benefits the supply sites by driving demand and the forecasting of master scheduling efforts at customer sites. This brings QAD into the umbrella of sales and operations plans that we talked about last month at the West Coast user group. And as we said, DRP eliminates the need of matching purchase orders and sales orders to affect Intersite requests. These are all handled now by distribution. The origin of DRP process was developed as a planning tool by a gentleman named Andre Martin at Abbott Labs in the 1970s. Andre is considered the father of DRP. He's consulted for over 35 years in terms of defining and successfully implementing customer programs. He is the author of 3 books, the primary of which is DRP, the Gateway to True Quick Response and Continuous Replenishment. He also has another book called Distribution Resource Planning, Distribution Management's Most Powerful Tool. If you're interested in retail applications, he also authored Flow Casting, which you might be interested in. As with all new subjects in QAD, there are lots of new terms and concepts and acronyms, from demand and receiving sites to network codes to Intersite demand, transportation, shipping schedules, source networks, load reports, DRP planning, lots of new terms to use. Here we see the functions of the DRP in menu 12 of QAD distribution plan. Remember, each implementation of DRP depends on the structures and conformances of your organization, manufacturing, and distribution modes. We will talk about source networks and transportation functions. We won't talk too much about serialization and packaging. We're going to cover that in another webinar later in 2022. But we'll talk about distribution planning, Intersite requests, Intersite orders, shipping, and just a word about accounting. Here is a DRP overview. It starts with the explosion of the DRP requirements. It then goes through the calculations, netting, very similar to the MRP process, with the network structure, which is in essence the bill of material for DRP, and then calculates a transportation network, all with planned orders and action messages. If you look at the detailed transactions, it starts off at the demand site with net change, regeneration, selective. That then drives down to reviewing and updating action messages in 12.13.5. In 12.15.1, we see the Intersite request maintenance, and that drives down to an Intersite demand confirm at the supply chain to 12.17.1. Distribution orders are maintained in 12.17.14, and then we ship distribution orders in 12.17.22, and then back at the receiving site, the distribution order receipts in 12.15.20. So you can follow basically this series of transactions that will make MRP operate. A quick statement about the control files concerned with DRP. Again, all QAD functions are defined by their controls files. And we've covered this MRP several times in Weber. We look at the MRP horizon, which is basically your CMLT, cumulative manufacturing lead time. Here is the MRP DRP combined checkbox, so it allows you to run those two together. The default summary, the order release, whether you're going to enable op history, and then some fields for IT network. In DRP, you set the 12.13.24 to support this combined DRP processing. If you set it to no, then you could only recalculate DRP through the 12.13.1, 2, or 3. If it's yes, then you can run DRP and MRP combined. You'll have to make that decision. DRP uses network and source network codes, in essence, the structure for DRP, as bills do for MRP, so that anytime you have an item that is affected by order timing, planning data changes, inventory balance updates, product structures, the system automatically checks that for recalculation and lets you run the DRP. This is similar to the 2322 or the 3625-3. One of the most or first elements to be considered for DRP setup is the domain structure of your network. All domains in a database share the most data-intensive records, including exchange, application, implementation, transformation, definitions. And if you use DRP in a multi-domain environment, you must set up the several kinds of data required for each domain. Note the tabs of general, shared, operational, company, and invoice numbering. We covered that in a webinar earlier in the year. Associated with domains in your DRP setup are entities in your network. Entities represent independent financial units within the business for which you are assessed taxes, generate separate balance sheets and income statements. Each entity within a domain inherits its base currency and uses the same shared sets. Remember, we have to have a business relationship created for each entity. The 2720.1.1 is all things with ERP. DRP starts with the customer. We have several types of customer records: sold to, billed to, shipped to, end user if you're using service and support. The tabs in the 27.20.1.1 represent the business relationship, accounting, revenue recognition issues, payment banking, some defaults, which are your SAF codes, credit, tax, and comment information. All users of DRP need to be set up and controlled in relationship to the use and flow of inventory defined for DRP. Some considerations are the role-based security, identifying users, email addresses, interface preferences, list of application for each user. In the 36.3.6.6, role maintenance is where we define the relationship between the role and a system user. Indicates what the default is and which domains are accessible to each user. The 12.2 company address maintenance is used for a number of things. It's used for tax calculations and intrastat reporting. The company addresses are used for bill to ship tos in terms of purchasing accounting controls, sales orders, sales accounting controls, and service and support addresses are also printed on quotes, orders, invoices, and contracts. Global Tax Management offers an excellent tool for defining precise tax calculation functionality. GTM addresses tax by geographic locations, taxes by line, tax charges, taxes that are included in other tax amounts, reverse calculations. We don't have time to discuss all of the global tax management implications, but in our DRP, it has significant impact on the general ledger transactions, processing, and cost generation. The 29.2.1 for DRP defines the tax zones that are used by DRP to set up geographic regions, countries, states, counties, cities, postal districts that use the system to identify tax information for GL transactions. Very important that these be set up correctly so that anything that affects the tax is recognized accurately. The 1.1.13 site maintenance Site maintenance is used in conjunction with domain and entity setup and defines the records that identify the logical places where you manufacture, distribute, and store inventory. The 1.1 to 13, first you set up the supply sites as required by your environment. You should take caution to use the correct designation for the demand. You should also be very aware of the account setup. And I always recommend that automatic locations be set to no. Otherwise, you expose yourself to the typo errors that the guys in the stockroom might cause. Then the demand sites also need to be set up. We'll talk about the inventory status codes in just a moment. Location codes. Location codes are where you store and maintain inventory records. Very critical to DRP. Note there's a new number for location management. It used to be 1.1.18. It's now 1.1.1. And there are two new types of locations. The 1.1.18.13 Work Center reserve location. We don't have much time to go through there. The other is the 1.1.18.16 production line reserved location. In both of those, I liked this particular field, the preference field. This determines the sequence by which locations are examined for allocation. That is a very powerful tool in these new location fields. The inventory status code maintenance sets up and creates modes of how you're going to use inventory. You can set up as many as you need with the appropriate available, nettable, or over issue functionality. You could sim load. Probably the most efficacious is the use of the restricted transactions in a particular lot or location. For DRP, it's always a good idea to create a GIT location, goods in transit, with the available equal no, nettable, yes or no depending, and over issue equal no. The item master, be aware that all items that are used in DRP must be defined in the item master file, obviously. You'll probably want to review all 83 fields in the item master file to ensure that unique instances of the DRP items are properly identified. Again, DRP uses item source networks to determine where to create requirements. Routings and cost information for DRP items are basically for reference only. In the 1.4.1 item picking data or item inventory data, we have a new frame also in the 1.4.16. You should be aware of these for your setup. There is an allocation policy, which allows either detail or general allocations. There's a pick policy. You can either pick and issue it or don't pick it, or pick and transfer. You can transfer the allocation or keep the allocation, drop it. You can also, this used to be in 1.4.17. They changed it to 1.4.16. This is your free stock account. Basically, pick and issue. Do not pick or pick and transfer. There's also allocations, manufacturing pick, ascending or descending, key item, and there are some picking minimum, maximums, and multiples. The 1.4.7 and or 1.4.17 are critical to the setup of your DRP environment. Two fields. The first is the purchase manufacturer type. All DRP items should be D. DRP uses the item source network to generate the requirements, and it uses transportation lead time and shipping schedules to calculate when parts need to be shipped from one site to another. In 11.3.7, we don't have time to go over all of the functionality of service and support, but you should take into account, or at least think about, the things that you have in your install base, your trunk stock, RMAs, RTSs, as these values may be of assistance when analyzing your DRP requirements. A word to the wise, SSM is no longer SSM. It has now been renamed to FSM, Field Service Management, aka Tamaralo. The network structure in DRP is to DRP as product structure is to MRP. The 12.1 network menu lets you accomplish that structure. And this is critical because this is what makes DRP work. First is a 12.1.1 network code maintenance. It's where you create the codes and then you tie them together in 12.1.3 source network maintenance. This requires a lot of thought in planning, loading of data. Be sure, play with it until you absolutely know that this structure represents your organization. The picture you see here is a simplistic network structure with appropriate codes defined. You have a receiving site, a supplying site or a code, and then a percentage of how much that supplying site is going to give to the receiving site. You have the item, the codes for make buy, and the network codes that we've defined again in 1.4.7. How many records does this represent for your organization? Network maintenance. The source network structure is based upon the network code maintenance. DRP looks at the source assigned to the item in item planning and then uses that to generate Intersite requests. This allows for the structure or the relationships between receiving sites and supply chains for various circumstances like different planners, product lines, data organizations. If the product moves both ways between sites, remember, relationships can't be cyclical, so one needs to define one source network code for each direction. The different types of transportation are defined, and the lead times can be variable to the network, and this allows for each node to be planned differently, along with, as we mentioned, the supply percentages. The 12.1.13 source network maintenance. Here you have the network code with a receiving site, a supplying site, your effectivity dates, the supplying percentage of the supply type to the receiving site, your transportation code, and lead time. So DRP plans Intersite requests exactly the same for all items assigned to the same network code. Remember, you must assign every DRP item to one and only one source network code. The 12.1.17 source network browse. This is the structure of your DRP, just as product structures are your structure for MRP. This needs to be a picture of your distribution, and it needs to be 100% correct. 12.5, transportation management measure, lets you create transportation shipping process to account for each item to each site by whatever mode you need. The primary maintenance fields in 12.5 are transportation mode maintenance, network maintenance, a shipping schedule, and a freight table. Here's a picture of a simple transportation network. How complex is yours? Lets you define the type of transportation, whether the unload lead time. It is a volume calculation. There's different types of transportation. Truck, ship, air, all could have different receiving site, supply site. There's a transit lead time, an unload lead time, and then shipping days and possible receiving days. The 12.5.1 lets you create the transportation network maintenance. This allows you to define the transportation ID, the 12.1 or 12.55 transportation network. There's the node or the mode of transportation. You've got a source site, a receiving site. You've got transportation lead times. You've got days of the week that you need to think about, and effectivity ranges. The 12.5.9 shipping schedule maintenance allows you to set up a detail of which days a particular site receiving or source site receiving site might be scheduled for shipping. The 12.5.13 rate table maintenance allows you to set up freight tables that are used to record freight charges to apply to different shipping weights depending on how you ship it. Each rate table can be based on a specific quantity, unit of measure per 100 kilograms at each weight level, as a different freight rate may be specified, and this information can be very useful in analyzing different shipping cost alternatives. The 12.5.18 shipping load report is great for planners and probably is the transportation planner's most important report. It's also good for comparing plan to actual. Run it often as a history process. Shipping capacity is becoming a bigger and bigger issue in the supply chain caused by COVID and supply chain disruptions. Another good tool for transportation management is what is called the supplier milk run functionality. The enterprise editions include support for the concept of a milk run. This includes optimum use of vehicle capacity, and the process offers a potential in controlling transportation issues. You first set up the supplier schedules, your transfer nodes, your network, then you run your standard supplier schedule process, and then you run the milk run specific process, which basically is you run an MRP run, you run the schedule update from MRP, you update type 4 and 6 supplier schedules, you create pick lists, you maintain and confirm the pick list, you adjust as required, communicate your requirements to suppliers, EDI, whatever, and then you print the pick list and communicate that to your carriers. Obviously, demand is going to drive the system, even without DRP in place. When trying to drive ERP with DRP, it can require a significant effort because you need to drive forecast at each source network node within a site. We covered forecasting a little bit last month in terms of S&OP. I won't get into it. There's a couple of webinars out there on our website on 22.1 and 22.7 simulated forecast. If you don't utilize 22.1 or 22.7 forecast to drive your MRP DRP, then the sales order maintenance 7.1.1 will be your primary source of demand. Use the sales order to create items that are going to be sold by line, trailer. We've covered this in previous webinars. A couple of references there for the 32 sub. When all the demand has been recognized, either through forecast maintenance or supply sales order maintenance, you can then explode the requirements for the distribution network. This is done through either 12.13.1, net change, 2, regen, 3, significance. Pretty much like 12 or 23.1, 2, and 3 for MRP. Now we can use DRP explosions to drive into our distribution requirements planning process. After running net change, regen, selected, you obtain DRP action messages to review and update. You can go through the planned Intersite requests, approve the requests if appropriate. We've already talked about low codes and DRP. The 12.15.24 distribution management control sets and controls Intersite request DO and other characteristics of the DRP system. Auto requisitions, next requisition prefix, comments, next DO prefix itself, etc. The goods in transit, location status, etc. Just a quick review of MRP explosion logic, because this is what MRP does and what DRP does. Here's the basic MRP. We got a sales order and a forecast. We've got work orders, discrete, purchase orders, supplier schedules, and then we calculate the projected available. That then nets out against the scheduled receipts and our gross requirements until we come to a negative projection quantity on hand. That means we got a net requirement. We plan an order for that, offset it by lead time, and it comes back into stock in a new net available. If we look at DRP in the same sense, here we have distribution A and B. Here we have central supply. The 200 comes down in week 1 and 3 from A, 100 for B in period 2, and our 400 on hand. We again net to a negative, offset it through the release, comes back in, and nets for the central supply MRP process. If you do it on a multi-level environment, same sort of netting process, gross to net, offset, net, gross to net, 50 down, period 3, net to our process of planned Intersite requests and Intersite releases. After DRP explosion, normally DRP planner will analyze the action messages for review and update. You've got a number of options for exception messages, basically begin, create, expedite, de-expedite, cancel, release, time, fence, etc. So every day you should be running 12.13.6 DRP action message browse. This gives you all of the action messages for both MRP and DRP, paying specific attention to date, message, order, line, action quantity, and due date. You should do this first thing every morning. 12.13.12 Intersite request report. It's going to give you a list of all of the Intersite requests that are outstanding. The 12.13.14 DRP summary report. This is probably DRP Planner's primary report. Here you can see everything you'd ever want to know about DRP, and then your time phase horizon or horizontal display of your Intersite requests, gross, scheduled receipts, projected on hand, etc. The 23.17 is pretty much the same as 12.13.17 is the same as 23.17. You've got date, gross requirements, projected quantity on hand, planned, and then detail information. The 12.13.10 planned Intersite request approval. This is where you can use the system to assist in the approval of Intersite requests. If you are at that point, I'd be cautious of the default and approve. That depends on how you're going to use the menu for the approval. And then if you want to approve it, you can check box and it will create a firm planned order for the Intersite request. 12.17.13 distribution order workbench. This will create distribution orders based on various selection criteria for Intersite requests. It will give you that, and it'll show you how many matching selections were there. This requires a lot of practice with the DRP netting process, so be cautious with that. The 12.15.1 Intersite request maintenance. Intersite request at the demand site is used to manually enter the request or modify the request generated by DRP. Site, dates, quantities. There's a shipping performance section to it, and you can also set up the shipping data right in the Intersite request maintenance. Intersite demand confirmation. This is for the supplying site. You approve the Intersite request, or you can modify it. You can set the general detail allocations and manually create requests. This is only required if the Intersite request is not previously confirmed. 12.15.9 Intersite demand. If you've got demand between sites, different domains and different databases, you can use this to update and recognize the Intersite demands. The 12.17.12 Intersite demand validation. If you use this for the source or supplying database, it basically does the same update kind of thing for the supply. Again, this is only required if you are in different databases. The 12.15.6 distributed inventory. This may be the most important report available to a distribution planner. Once all the setup is accomplished and the DRP process is run and controlled, the tracking of the dynamic movement of inventory in your network is where DRP is of value. So this allows you to keep track of where all distribution inventory is. The 12.17.14, this can reference one or more Intersite requests. In preparing and picking shipping information to another site within your company, it can reference an Intersite request from DRP planning, kind of similar to a production order request. You can then set the quantity required and order data on the allocated details, ship location, etc., and define what the transportation mode is. The 12.17.18 distribution order print. This can be printed as a hard copy for any purpose you need within the DRP system. The 12.17.19 distribution order pick list. This creates a document that allows you to send this piece of paper with the parts to an accompanying site or location. The 12.17.22 DO shipment. Now, this distribution order is used to record that you've sent items to another site in your network. The items are taken out of your inventory and moved to an in-transit location. The 12.15.14 orders in transit. You got to know where those parts are. So you use that 12.14, and then once they're received, the 12.15.20 distribution order receipt receives the part, transfers the received items from the in-transit to the location, and then generates all the appropriate transactions and GL history. 36.3.7.15 DO receipts maintenance allows you to say who is going to do that based on roles. The 12.17.21 distribution order processing combines basically the distribution order maintenance and distribution order shipments into one frame. The 12.19 distributed order shipping menu allows you to do the pre-shipper maintenance, very similar to 7.9.2. Output your hard copy. You can do shipper confirmations. For containers, there's a couple of options there. You can print labels, and then there's a number of error and file correction menus that you might want to look at. 12.19.24 DO container shipment lets you ship or set the sequence IDs for shipper, pre-shipper, master schedule. You can ship labels. The 12.19.11 allows you to print a shipper, kind of similar to the 7.9 2. And then the 7913 records the individual shipment, converts the DO pre-shipper to shipper, confirms the movement. You can delete and DO in lines, and then inventory is reduced at the shipping location, and then a complete audit trail is put into TR-HIS, and you can look for the ISS-DO. The backlog missed shipment report details the status of information for transportation and in process that violate due date criteria. It's kind of handy for our planner. The shipment reconciliation looks at distribution orders where receipt quantity differs from shipment quantity. And then the DRP logistics account has some very powerful tools to structure and control costs. Again, we'll talk about that next year. Keeping track of the inventory is the critical part of DRP. There's several tools we can use. 3.21.2, these are the transactions that you might want to look for those transactions. The 7572.12, or what used to be the old 3.1.14, inventory status, shows you where parts are. Then the stock availability, either 317 or 361, shows you what the status of those parts are. And DRP has always been one of my favorite supply chain tools, probably because it was exposed. I was exposed to it early in my career, and I had the opportunity to work with several ERP versions of DRP, SAP, Infor, Mapex, Syncom, a number of them. I also got to hear Andre Martin give an in-process keynote address at one of the conferences that I attended in my youth. Having used MRP for over 50 years, DRP is its twin brother. I have a twin brother. Word of caution, he lost his big toe to COVID. COVID is a real thing. Get vaccinated. We covered a lot of stuff today, a little bit. Talked about the foundation, talked about Andre Mountain. We defined DRP. We went over the 13 different data points required for DRP. Talked about transportation management, DRP planning, Intersite requests, distribution orders, distribution shipping, a little bit about accounting. If you're going to use DRP, you need to understand it better. You need to know the role of MRP and DRP. You need to be able to describe it. You need to understand the time phasing. You need to understand bills of material and network codes, lead time, exploding and offsetting, the data elements within the QAD menus, and how to optimize the planning elements. There's your learning tool. Again, the best way to learn any new functionality QAD is, first of all, read the process map, then understand the menus, then read the user and the training guides, then find a sandbox database somewhere, hit the keys, and make it work. Lots of resources out there to learn more about DRP. There's lots of Apex seminars, conference proceedings. There's the QAD Foreman, the knowledge base, document library, the Learning Center. Those are all great places to learn. The 32Soft Loaders offers several loaders and applications that can assist around this DRP functionality. From sales order loaders to Production Planner Plus, we even have a workbench for distribution orders. Again, the amount of time required to properly run and operate one of these things is voluminous. 32Soft can help get data in and out of QAD in a familiar Excel format. Makes it easier to process. It's got 60-day compatibility trials, easy installation. Alina, Andreas, Christian are always there. The loaders work with SE and EE and cloud. So please contact myself, Denise, or Alex if you're interested in any of those loaders. We hope you've enjoyed this short overview regarding the QAD approach to distribution planning. Implementation of a DRP functionality can make a significant contribution to increased levels of control over the use of inventory, reducing costs amid current supply chain disruptions. We wish you the best for 2021 and a better 2022. Remember, MUG is having an in-person conference in the spring of 22 at Oak Hills, Illinois. And Scott Gaines tells me that the West Coast User Group is planning a one-day spring get-together somewhere in the Bay Area in April of 2022. So come out and support your user group. Contact Denise or myself if you got any questions regarding DRP after the webinar is closed, and we'll be glad to get back with you as soon as possible. Thank you so much. And Denise, back to you.
Training. We are asked rather often if we train, and we do. We've had hundreds of trainees among dozens of custom sessions. So if you need any training assistance, whether individual or group, and for any level of proficiency, of course, just let us know. And here is a look at our first webinars of 2022. We kick off the new year in January with using QAD tools to manage recalls. And in February, we have made to order the future of the supply chain. And as Don mentioned, the QAD user groups have begun planning their spring conferences, which will be, we understand, in March and April. And certainly we hope to see you there. But back to today's DRP webinar. Let me check again. We still have no questions, but as Don said, if you think of anything after the session, just give us a call or shoot us an email and we will include, we'll answer your question, obviously, and include it when we publish the replay. Let's see. Okay. During today's webinar, Don did say keeping track of inventory is the critical part of DRP. So in honor of Veterans Day last week and all of our veterans everywhere, thank you for your service. You included Don, who I did not know. Thank you. So I am quoting this month General George Patton, who said, "The officer who doesn't know his communications and supply as well as his tactics is totally useless." In the business realm, really totally useless is a bit extreme, but the quote does translate as knowing our supply/inventory is critical. Don, since we don't have any questions, just want to check with you. Did we cover everything we wanted to today?
I think we did. I wanted to thank everybody for your attendance during 2021. It's been a trying time for all of us, and we are very much hoping that 2022 is smoother for the supply chain. As Denise says, we have a number of webinars planned the first couple of months of 2022, so we hope you plan to attend us. And thank you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a blessed Christmas.
Yes, thank you, Don. As always, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And we do wish you and yours a safe and super holiday season and a spectacular 2022. From all of us at 32Soft, thank you again and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you much. Bye-bye.